This is Everquest in a way that I never, ever would have thought possible. A way that kind of defies the very meaning of the game. It's actually pretty fun. What if Everquest allowed you to mix and match classes? A shaman who was also a shadow knight? What about a necromancer? What about a necromancer berserker? Or even a shaman necromancer berserker trio? And what if they really kind of turned that game into a sort of power fantasy solo duo game? Well, that's kind of what Hero's Journey is. Given Everquest's roots as a deeply social, challenging D&D experience, you may have never wondered what Everquest would look like if it leaned into the ARPG-ification of MMOs. But that doesn't mean that the Hero's Journey isn't a fun jaunt into familiar haunts, even if it's not quite for me. But it might be for you. Though I do have to admit, after playing it over the last couple weeks, I can see its addicting quality for sure. You know, you never know. Maybe this might be your very next Evercrack, I guess. YouTube, if you're wanting to demonetize this video, Evercrack is not a real thing. It's a joke. Please don't demonetize me. The thing is, this goes beyond just this server that we're going to talk about, because given Everquest and Daybreak and their recent additions of things like personas, which allows you to have multiple classes all on a single character, although there's some limitations on how and when you can use them, but you can even share gear between those characters. Well, it might not be so far-fetched that this server could be used as potential building blocks for something that Daybreak might actually do in the coming months or years, depending on how much they want to push that progression server envelope with a couple tweaks. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about the Hero's Journey, a private server of Everquest. A server like P99, though this one is not officially recognized by Daybreak the way that P99 is. Hero's Journey is designed around solo and duo play, though of course you can group up to 6 people like usual, with everything from group encounters to raids being conquered like that with those smaller groups. It's a strictly true box server and does not allow third-party cheat programs, though it includes some of that functionality in the base of the game itself, like an active map. The real kicker of this server though, and why it's so fascinating, is that you are not just a shaman or a necromancer or a berserker. You are essentially all three. You will have access to alternate abilities that are long past what you start with, like getting the Buried Sea AAs at level 51+. But other aspects like spells and abilities can be used in tandem. As that Necro Berserker Shaman trio, I was able to use life taps, frenzy, and slow things, even slowing them with my instant cast AA ability, which felt really overpowered. And I was able to do all this with 2 pets, the Shaman pet and the Necromancer pet, and I was able to even give those pets powerful weapons, and they were able to use them, including 2-handed weapons that were really freaking powerful. Giving your Necromancer pet a 2-handed rock smasher from Aerie in TOV, I gotta admit, that's pretty intoxicating. It really is. Now, one thing I learned quickly as I went through the game on my little self-made hybrid character is I was actually probably not playing the meta. Sure, Frenzy plus Shaman's Rabid Bear was really fun and felt very powerful, but I was also certain I was being much less efficient. And that's where this whole meta chasing comes in, the same kind of thing you would see in an ARPG. There are entire videos and essays written on what the best meta builds are on the server, combining gear and skills and all kinds of AAs, and what classes to bring together, and whether you should use pets or not use pets. It's a whole thing, which honestly, being completely honest, is probably why it's not for me. Because in general, over time, I have usually bounced off of ARPGs or MMOs that lean too much into meta building, because I don't like to build around metas, and when the meta is there, I tend to feel like, well, I might as well not do anything because it's not as efficient. I don't know, maybe it's a me thing, but that's also a very huge draw for a lot of people. So I want to just like be clear of my bias up here at the front and that fact that you may actually really enjoy that. In fact, I wanted to point out that some of that meta building is actually what leads to a lot of socializing in this game that is actually really solo friendly. A version of Everquest that leans into solo, but has a whole vibrant community of people talking and seeing what is the best way to do things and how to solve things. And it's kind of, it's not the old classic type of Everquest that I was used to. It's not even the progression server type of Everquest, but because there's this new thing to solve, you see people in game trying to solve those things together. Now, I wouldn't say like everybody's the nicest ever or anything like that. It's not like this is the bastion of the nicest community ever made, but a lot of people were seen very nice and very helpful in this game and wanting to assist people in understanding what are the best ways to go about things or how to solve certain quests and things like that, because there are some custom things in this server. And there's actually quite a few people that were trying to go as duos or group up or things like that. The game is built in a way that lets you play completely solo or interact with others, and because the server is free trade, commerce is a huge part of the game. You know, buying and selling of gear, including raid gear, or I guess at this point like solo gear, but solo gear from someone stronger than you. But on the less fun side, I gotta point out at least one thing negative that I saw that I'm actually was just left a huge bad taste in my mouth when I played on Teak, the Everquest progression server. And I was sad to see that it existed on this server too. And that was people selling power leveling. I think no matter what you do in Everquest, you will find now people trying to sell power leveling. At least I guess in this one, they're not selling it for chrono. It's just one of those things, I guess. Why try to skip the game? But there are even more changes to the game that really should be noted. Items themselves have tiers. You have your basic item level, an enchanted item level, and a legendary item level. This kind of works off a luck system, but also uses Depths of Dark Hollow's evolving item system in a way. You can evolve any item into a higher quality. The experience towards your item you get is based off of the con color of the enemies you fight, meaning you might find it more beneficial to kill a bunch of super fast kill dark blues instead of a few slower red cons. And you can only do it to one item at a time by putting it in your power slot. And it does take time. It is, especially going from enchanted to legendary, and depending on the strength of the item, it can be very, very grindy. There's also another part of that where if you get the same item, you can combine it with that item to kind of skip some of that level of grinding. Really just kind of like having the item eat the item. But at the same time, like it is a grind. It is another facet of growing your gear, and usually the enchanted item has like immensely higher stats, and then the legendary version tends to have like heroic stats on top of it and things like that. But that's not all that's grindy. I mean, the game itself is grindy. Even with tons of bonuses ongoing on the server while I was playing, I put in quite a few hours and still had hundreds, if not thousands of hours I could put into the game beyond what I'd accomplished. And that doesn't take into account that they're still unlocking expansions. They just unlocked Luckland when I started taking on Nagy and Vox, for example. You will spend quite a bit of time just getting your AAs, getting your levels and your AAs. The game is still Everquest. But I mentioned taking on Nagy and Vox, and I was able to take on Nagy and Vox uncontested because the game works off of a kind of a 3-instance system. You have the base zone, which is contested, a respawning instance of the zone as the expedition, which will not have raid targets in it, and a non-respawning version of the zone, which does have the raid targets. Not every zone in the game will have these instances, but many do. Really the ones you would care the most about. This goes along with other convenience features in the game, such as fast travel to some zones, but you would have to have traveled to those zones first. Like you would have to go to Grob and then run all the way down to Lower Guck, but once you'd run down to Lower Guck, you get there's this little marker on the ground, and that becomes your new fast travel, which you can go to from the bazaar. But that fast travel is not in every zone either. Fast travel is essentially a translocator like the Magus inside the bazaar, which you can always port to and from. The bazaar is also where you'll be doing most of your commerce with others, and it's set up like the old EverQuest 1 bazaar from Luckland before it got changed over to its current iteration, which brings back a little bit of nostalgia for me because I really liked that version of the bazaar. It's kind of this server's POK with spell vendors as well, but as far as I could tell, the spells only went up to level 50 unless someone had already sold the spells to them, though that could be because I was progression capped. You see, progression in this game is not like server wide, like everyone progresses at the same time. If you jump into this server right now, you won't be on Luckland. You won't be on Velius. You won't even be on Canark. You will be on Classic because progression is account wide, not server wide. You see, I could not level past level 50 when I started this game. I was hard capped at 50 because I needed to do 2 quests. First, and possibly the easiest, I needed to kill Vox and Nagy. Easy enough given how powerful my AAs and gear have made me, and that I can spawn instances of them to go and try them. Although honestly, I did still die a couple times to Nagy. And these fights weren't exactly as epic as I thought they might be. I mean, maybe I had kind of overdone it with my gearing, so that's probably a big part of it. But at the same time, they did kind of go down pretty easily. But next up though, I needed to get legendary versions of a few items that are pretty iconic to classic EverQuest, like Jarn's Amethyst Ring and the Elemental Binder. To complete that progression, you can purchase the items or farm the items or get lucky and get the legendary drop because they have to be the legendary versions of them. Or you might not actually have to do that because while I thought that you did need to, because when I talked to the Canark NPC, it told me that for flagging for Canark, I needed to get those items and then also get Killing of the Dragons when I killed the dragons and I was still missing the legendary version of the Froglike King's Crown. I was already flagged for Canark. So maybe that's not as necessary as I thought it was. I was on the wiki, it says it is, so I was kind of following that. So maybe you don't need to. Maybe you just need to kill Vox and Nagy. So editing Redbeard here, I looked at the wiki again, and what it looks like is you can take either the hero path or the explorer path to unlock the next expansion. So you can go either way if you want to go take on the raid targets or if you want to farm the items. For some reason, I thought it was both, but it looks like you could do either one. The progression in this server is generally deeper than I would have imagined, and it's well maintained. Because the game is free trade and is flooded with loot, it's not exactly difficult, though there are certain chase items, meta builds, and the fact that they're continuing to unlock expansions means that target will keep moving. They also make balance patches, one that went through while I was playing, that come with the usual doomsday rhetoric that you're used to seeing in other MMOs or in EverQuest itself, which makes me think one thing about this game, about this server. People care. They care about their builds, they care about the time they've invested, and they're enjoying themselves enough and getting invested enough to actually care. And that's fantastic. Now, I said at the outset that this server isn't really for me specifically, and that's really just because it's a bit too grindy and a bit too meta focused and a bit too solo oriented. I'd personally love a solo RPG of EverQuest one day, but one with a narrative story built around the lore. But in this game, it's largely just re-experiencing things I've already experienced with full raids. But I can't deny that going and soloing Nagy and Vox felt really good. Same with spending some time just grinding experience in the Plane of Fear. I might hop in every now and then just to see how things are going, progress a little bit, but as a fan of the EverQuest franchise in general, I'm just happy to see so many people enjoying a new take on the game 25 plus years after its launch. And it actually makes me wonder if Darkpaw themselves might look at this server for inspiration for their upcoming servers. A sort of system where they allow like a D&D-esque like multi-classing of systems in EverQuest probably isn't as far-fetched as you might think. The ideas of this Hero's Journey server are probably not as far-fetched as you might think. There's a couple reasons why. First, They've added personas to all servers, which essentially lets you play infinite classes on one character and share gear. Of course, it's monetized with how many classes you can pick, but you can swap to whatever class you want as long as it's within a safe zone, so basically within a city. And number two, well, since about 2016, they've been trying different server rule sets with their progression servers, from adding agents of change with the Finagel server for instance rating, to the first hit encounter locking, to event servers that have different bonuses unlocking, to randomized loot free trade servers like the more recent ones. They're basically throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks, at sometimes with these progression servers. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they would do something like this. Now that said, I don't see them doing anything exactly like Hero's Journey, because this is too much power in one character, especially because, well, they'd want to monetize the hell out of it. But also because I don't think they want to give personal instances the way that they're doing this either, and they want players to be, you know, sharing content a little bit more. What I would expect to see is potentially something a bit more like, if they go this route, maybe the way that Final Fantasy XIV initially did it, where you could multi-class with different jobs, but you could only have like 1 or 2 skills from that job that you would take over. And that would be powerful and a new way to play and a new way to customize in EverQuest, but not exactly as game breaking as being able to have an instant cast 75% slow as a berserker with frenzy. But if you want to try this, if you want to jump in and see what EverQuest might be like if it was made by Grinding Gear Games and you had the ability to really take any kind of AAs and a ridiculous amount of AAs and put them all on one character and along with all their skills and abilities and make your own build, then I've linked it down below so you can try it out. I would not recommend this server for someone who's never played EverQuest before, mostly because, not because I don't think that it would be enjoyable, but mostly because it is so far from what EverQuest and like the experience of EverQuest is. I would recommend more trying like a P99 if you want that really hardcore version, although sometimes populations can be an issue, or trying a progression server, which also, again, populations can be an issue. It is one of the downsides of having a deeply social MMO as well as a solved MMO, where there's just going to be gaps in when people want to be able to play the game, but at least the content exists. But at least you get to experience some of the difficulty that went into it that made it a more of a social game, because you needed other people. You don't necessarily need other people in this game, although I guess you don't really need other people in EverQuest Live unless you're doing like raid or group content, I guess. So I don't know. But at the same time, I would recommend this server for people that have been playing a lot of EverQuest, or maybe they played a lot of EverQuest back in the day and they just want to see something different. Maybe they really got into Path of Exile 2 recently, but they want to see what that would be like if EverQuest was the game that they were playing and building on. So yeah, if you like ARPGs and if you like EverQuest, this is kind of like a match, an incredible match to make. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.